let's say that certain private contractors have UAP programs in terms of reverse engineering programs. However, such as the security and the classification around it, that it's extremely difficult to get anyone cleared to actually work on such programs. And I would speculate that, a lot of the people on these programs, perhaps, they're ready for retirement. There is acknowledgement that there needs to be new blood, new talent coming into it. And also, there's not enough resources as well. There's not enough people cleared at doing this and looking into these programs, especially when you've got nations like China that can throw a lot more resources at doing this and keep it a secret as well. You will have cases which are truly unidentifiable and that, have the obvious conclusion that are something leap years ahead of what, nations on Earth have. For what that, there can only be one conclusion. These things are not human. They're not from, they don't originate from this earth, basically, as we know it. I expect that we'll have confirmation next year that there are materials or a craft of unknown origin or of non-human origin. I suspect that we'll get that confirmation next year.
The following is my conversation with Christopher Sharp. Chris is based in London and has a background in communications. He's also the founder and editor-in-chief of Liberation Times. He's also a senior contributing journalist at the Daily Mail. Chris is increasingly ahead of the curve with UAP UFO news and commentary and has caught the eye of many in the UFO world, especially UFO Twitter. He's also caught the eye of big names in the subject, people like Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo. Chris is one to watch and follow to keep in the loop for real-time UFO UAP news and disclosure updates internationally. So, the following is my conversation with Christopher Sharp. Chris, thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy chap. I follow you on Twitter. UFO Twitter is probably an interesting place for anybody that isn't aware of the kind of UFO Twitter world. And I know that for myself, I've been kind of following that for quite a while. And I've seen you pop up, and I've seen Liberation Times, and I'm an avid reader. I've followed your publication for quite some time. I'm loving the stuff. You seem to be kind of ahead of the curve quite a bit with a lot of the new stuff coming out. So I'm kind of keen to hear firstly, where did it start with Liberation Times, and how did you kind of move into the UAP world specifically? I know you cover other bits and pieces, but you're very kind of seem to dominate your sort of stories and stuff. How did that come about?
Yeah, absolutely. No, firstly, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be here with you, and thank you for having me on. In terms of Liberation Times, I mean, I come from a comms background. I work in communications, and I guess during the pandemic, my wife being a nurse, it was very, very difficult to kind of balance that, taking care of my son, and it got too much really for me. So I quit my job, and I was a little bit bored one day, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to create a website because I'd learned some skills in Squarespace. I thought, yeah, it seems to fit. I could do this, and it was going to be I called it Liberation Times because I wanted it to be a website that covered general current affairs and stuff. But I guess UAP was the topic just fascinated me most. So I just went all into UAP, I think, at one point, and it's just gone from there. And I think one of my key aims when I first got into it was basically just doing one interview with Lou Elizondo, and if I'd done that, that was my dream come true, it was amazing. And but yeah, so what happened instead was that look, I was just writing articles. It was doing okay, and I think that one day I wrote an article. It got the attention of Christopher Mellon, and then Lou retweeted it as well, and it kind of really exploded from there in terms of the website and engagement. And yeah, I really found a style in terms of writing and stuff, and how to look at the UAP topic, and Yeah, I guess from there I just developed a bit of a reputation. I got some really good sources, and yeah, it's just really gone from strength to strength. None of it was really planned, you know. It's just kind of like it was just really spontaneous, you know. Yeah, and I mean, like I never rest on my laurels or anything, you know. Each month I have to prove myself, and you know, provide my audience the best coverage and best information possible on the topic.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, as I say, I follow it. You know, I keep an eye on it every day. I'm always in sort of Twitter, and I check out your website. For those listening, some probably quite a few of the people listening on perhaps on Spotify will not necessarily be on Twitter. And it's so it's liberationtimes.com, isn't it? Your website for them to come and find that. I'll put a link to that, and also your Twitter handle. But in terms of in terms of the kind of the UFO subject, I'm the same as you, really. I kind of got into it at that period of time. And again, for those on Spotify, I kind of started through Instagram, which is a very different style than Twitter. Twitter's very unique, shall we say. But again, I mean, my interest had dated back a very long time, but it was kind of peaked really with the David Grush stuff that came out, and all of a sudden it kind of reignited something. What about yourself? I mean, where did the UFO UAP stuff start with you? Was it very much around the same time that you started Liberation Times, or was it earlier than that?
I think I've always been into it, like since I was a kid and stuff. I think like one of my first little stories I wrote at primary school was about me, my friends, my dog seeing a UFO inside our local forest or something like that, and I wrote a story about it. And yeah, I don't know why like I did that. Like, where did the inspiration come from? You know? And yeah, and I guess like when I was a teenager, I watched all the documentaries and everything. Just found it really fascinating. Um, and then I guess like when I started university, you know, and started my professional career, you kind of like forget about it, and you don't really want to discuss UAPs with people because of the stigma. And I guess I kind of like forgot about it then. But I think when COVID hit, it was kind of like one of those black swan events, you know, that there's no precedent to in terms of our own reference. Um, uh, just everything being completely locked down. It was just insane. It was like the stuff of movies. So like when that happened, you're like, okay, maybe like this UAP stuff like might be real, because obviously we'd had the Corbell and Lazar stuff come out. We'd had TTSA and the Tom DeLonge interviews and stuff. And I think like, you know, when I had COVID and I could hardly breathe, I was struggling to like breathe and I thought I was going to die. I remember looking outside, it all seemed so bleak, you know, there's no one. London was a ghost town. I could see ambulances everywhere and hear the sirens. And I thought, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm going to die. And I think, you know, I think during that kind of like time, I remember seeing like the headline that the Pentagon had like verified the UAP videos be released by TTSA, and I thought, wow, that's incredible. So these are like definitely legit, and the Pentagon's confirming it. Isn't that insane? And yeah, I just remember seeing that, man, and I think like that really just caught my imagination. Then I think like during such a bleak time, you know, it just like gave me hope, you know, that there's something remarkable about our reality that we're still to discover, you know. So yeah, I think that really kept me going, you know, and you kind of like think, you know, if we do discover non-human intelligence and we kind of get the technology, then, you know, we may find cures like diseases and stuff like that. It may be transformative, you know, to humanity. So yeah, that's kind of like really got me into it again.
Well, it's great to hear your voice. I'm originally from London. I kind of moved up to the Midlands, but almost everybody that I've spoken to is American. Almost exclusively, everybody I've spoken to on the podcast is. And to be fair, the majority of the people that kind of follow the social media side of it are American. I think, with the exception of perhaps a couple, including Nick Pope, although albeit he's over in America as well. Which leads me kind of to my next question, really. Why do you think that there is such a big thing in America and there's hardly any of it, or it appears, certainly from my perspective, to be hardly any kind of a conversation around UAP, UFO in the UK? and it's such a big thing in America. Do you think that? Firstly, do you think that as well? And if so, why do you think that we haven't really kind of caught on quite as quickly as our friends over in the USA?
No, really, really good question. I think it's I think firstly you have like a number, you have the history and you have the people as well. Like, the UK doesn't have a Kehoe, you know, we don't have a Lou Elizondo, uh, a Chris Mellon and people like that, and a lot of the best researchers have been American as well. Not to say there haven't been great British people as well, you've had the likes of Timothy Good, Nick Pope, people like that. But I think in terms of the US, having MUFON, having a lot of the big historical cases, and also I guess the entertainment industry and the way that it works in America as well, and the movies, I think is part of that cultural zeitgeist in a way. So I think that's kind of like partially why. And I think as well that, it's kind of like the worst kept secret in the world in a way, because like so much information has leaked. And I think that you'll find that some of the events that have happened, historical events that have kind of like been part of the lore of UFO actually ending up being potentially real. I think, that may come out in the next few months or years, and be accepted as historical facts in some of the events that occurred. So I think, I think that's kind of like an element why, but, I think it's important to stress that, this is a global phenomenon. And if you look at the heat map, for instance, in the last UAP report released by the Arrow, you can see events all over the world. You can see them in North America, you can see them in the Middle East, you can see them in South China, parts of Europe as well. So yeah, I think that's really important to take into consideration. And also, you have France, the GIPAN, and you have China has its own UFO organization as well, which is huge. It has like thousands of members, and that's sanctioned by the communist state, which is really weird, because nothing ever happens in China without the government saying it can happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, but like it's important just to kind of like note that there is international kind of like interest in this. And there's events that have taken place all over the world, including the UK as well. You've got the Calvin um, event, you have the Rendlesham Forest incident. But I think in terms of like the current moment that we're in, it's very much the US kind of taking the lead on it. And I think like once we get past a certain point in time, I think then other intelligence services and governments will think, well, actually, we need to make the move now as well in terms of like setting up our own UAP office and being more upfront about this issue.
Do you get any kind of a feeling as to why there's been a shift so recently from the narrative of the government, from this is kind of previously this is silly, we're not going to talk about this subject, to it certainly appears to me that this is now a potential threat to aviation. This is something that we're going to take seriously. This is something we're going to talk about. And certainly from my perspective, it seems to have been before kind of David Grush came along. Certainly from 2017 and the big piece and the release of the Navy fighter pilot footage. So do you get that kind of impression that there's been this significant change in their language, the US government language around UAPs and taking it seriously? And also, do you get any kind of a sense as to why they've changed, or what do you think?
What a great question. Brilliant question. I would just say, in terms of the background is that let's say that certain private contractors have UAP programs in terms of reverse engineering programs. However, such as the security and the classification around it, that it's extremely difficult to get anyone cleared to actually work on such programs. And I would speculate that, a lot of the people on these programs, perhaps, they're ready for retirement. There is acknowledgement that there needs to be new blood, new talent coming into it. And also there's not enough resources as well. There's not enough people cleared at doing this and looking into these programs, especially when you've got nations like China that can throw a lot more resources at doing this and keep it a secret as well. I think it's partially that. Like, let's remember, if you've done cannabis once in your life and you're the best engineer in the world, there is no way you're working on this program. That's how big security is. So from that perspective, you can argue that it's in contractors' best interest to actually get this out here, basically, get this info out. So having an amnesty period would be in their best interest, which is basically what the new Schumer Rounds proposal within the National Defence Authorization Act allows for. So I'd argue that it's self-interest in terms of contractors who hold the programs. And I mean, that along with kind of engagement from the Congress, who feel really, really left out in terms of having the information at their hands because there's no oversight of these programs. I think that's really, really key to what's happening at the moment. Democratic oversight is key. National security is key, especially with China working on these programs, and also contractor interests as well. That's really, really important to take into account. So yeah, I think those are kind of like the pragmatic reasons you're seeing this happen right now. Let's not also forget as well that UAP simply means that it's unidentified. There are, it is a concern because what you need to do is you need to actually kind of, I mean, this is a problem with the UK as well. We do have a UAP problem in the UK, a big UAP problem. And that's important for a lot of reasons, because if you don't know what's in your sky, that means you don't know what's Chinese, you don't know what's Russian, you don't know what's an amateur weather balloon, and you don't know what's potentially truly anomalous and potentially exotic in origin, such as non-human craft. So that's really, really important, because if China or Russia are spying on UK test ranges and US test ranges, firstly, you need to get a handle on that. So that's really, really important. And the military should not be hiding that. And the intelligence services shouldn't be as well. But obviously, once you start looking into those cases in terms of potential Chinese and Russian activity, and you're able to make identifiable, you will have cases which are truly unidentifiable, and that have the obvious conclusion that are something leap years ahead of what nations on Earth have. For what that there could only be one conclusion: that these things are not human. They're not from they don't originate from this Earth, basically, as we know it. Well, not from any kind of like nation state on Earth, let's say. So yeah, I think that's the important thing to take into account when looking into this.
Just a strange one. I mean, I've had, and you may well have yourself. I've had a few. I've had contact from a few people that have given me pieces of information that I've chosen not to go with, and the reason for that was because, in my mind, and it goes back quite a long time, there's been this sort of misinformation and drip feeding sort of false information stuff into the media by intelligence services, et cetera, to try and muddy the waters or try and send people in a different direction. So you're not looking over here. I wonder, have you, obviously from your position and your publication, have you had any kind of stories that you've had to kind of look at and think, I'm not interested, I'm not going to publish that, or I don't, I can't. Have you had anything that has really made you think, I don't trust this source, or anything like that, just out of interest?
Not really. I mean, obviously you've got to think about that kind of stuff, yeah. But I mean, in terms of like my reporting, it's just all about just terms of what I can verify and what I can't verify, in terms of information. I mean, let's look at some of the stories out there, in terms of, let's look at the mummies that recently were showed in Mexico. It's a really, really hot topic. It's controversial. Some people are like, it's definitely not, including UAP advocates, will question it and say, look, it just doesn't stack up in terms of the science. But then you have like, a really prestigious university in South America basically saying it does stack up. And this is like really, really strange, but it's so contentious. I don't think that my reporting is going to do it justice, and I just lack the scientific expertise really to kind of like talk about it and kind of like have a real opinion on it, especially, if the experts can't even agree on it. And I just don't think that for the moment, I just don't think we can make much progress on it until we have some breakthrough information that kind of the skeptics can't deny. Let's look at the Indonesian pyramid, for example, that Graham Hancock claimed was, like something like around 20,000 years old, and it was mentioned in his documentary. The skeptics were like really criticizing him for that, saying that's nonsense and stuff like that. Well, look, recently, there's been some new information that's been published about that that triangle, and it's kind of like been that there's some significant evidence does kind of like seem to point that it is like around 20,000 years old, and it's incredible. Now you've got like Michael Shermer, chief skeptic of all skeptics, basically saying, "Wow, Hancock was right." So I mean, I think in terms of like that case, I think you're waiting for some breakthrough information and evidence to come across that kind of like really makes the case that these things are non-human, these mummies. So I'm it's a very, very difficult topic to weigh in on, and I think I'd wait until that moment comes around that we can actually verify it. So yeah, that's but in terms of disinformation, yeah, like that's obviously something that you've got to be wary of. And look, I've got lots of sources and people that I can kind of like that I trust, that I can kind of like talk to, and I can verify information with them and kind of get their opinion on it. And yeah, so I'm never alone in terms of making decisions if I'm thinking about doing a story. Um, but yeah, like I think like one important thing is just to be honest all the time. If you've reported a story, for instance, let's say on a video, um, uh, and video is always really, really difficult because they're always contentious. You always have, one side saying, "Oh, these are anomalous. We don't know what these things are," and you got another side saying, "Oh, it was a plane, it was a bird, or something like that, or a seagull." But like I think it's just ingenuous just to say that it's definitely this or it's definitely that. I think you just kind of like you put the video out there, you crowdsource it, and then when more information comes out, you report that information. And these things can be really, really tricky to solve sometimes. Look at the 2019 cases over the West Coast with the pyramid and all the other drones and stuff like that. There was an article that came out in some publications basically saying that these things came from a Chinese vessel called the Bass Strait. Well, actually, there was no evidence these things did come from a Chinese vessel called the Bass Strait. And we had witnesses, from that instance say, look, we had eyes on the Bass Strait the whole way, the whole way through this sighting. We were actually hoping that these things were coming from the Bass Strait because we couldn't explain where they were coming from, but they weren't. We had no evidence of that. So as we live in a day and age of instant gratification. People want answers now and now and quickly. And
Yeah.
a lot of the time, this is why it's so frustrating with some of these cases because the information isn't readily forthcoming, and unfortunately, a lot of the information is held by the DoD and the intelligence services. They're the ones with the sensor systems, they're the one with the satellite trackers and stuff like that, and they know a hell of a lot more information than the public will in terms of solving these things.
Yeah. I saw that you did a story on quite recently on Dr. James Lakatsky, and it kind of made me think. I mean, we more and more of these very credible people are coming out talking about what kind of information that they're allowed to say, but it's still quite vague. The Dr. James Lakatsky sort of statement was pretty wild in that we have craft, we've got inside of that craft. Paraphrasing, obviously, but. Do you think that we're going to see more of that? Do you think we're going to see more people coming forward? And do you think that, and I know it's all very speculative, but do you think that we're going to see any kind of a formal disclosure at a governmental level rather than kind of whistleblowers? And do you think we're likely to see that? I know it's, I am asking you to speculate, but kind of based on what you're seeing and the feeling that you're getting, do you think we're kind of close to that?
Yeah, so I've said for like the past few months now, and I stand by this assessment as well, that I expect that we'll have confirmation next year that there are materials or a craft of unknown origin or of non-human origin. I suspect that we'll get that confirmation next year, official confirmation from the US government, perhaps. So yeah, I think we are heading towards there now, especially with the Schumer and Brown's amendment. And I think that's really important because it will kind of like force this open, I feel. And I think, yeah, in addition to that, I think there will be more whistleblowers coming forward, most definitely. I think you can be certain of that. Within the next few months, they'll be coming forward, I suspect, publicly, which would be fantastic. Let's hope they do. I mean, it's still a fluid situation, of course, but I at this moment, I expect them to come forward. And yeah, I think some really important information will be imparted in terms of what's going to come, definitely. And yeah, I think let's just see. In terms of how far this is going to go, I don't know. I get the feeling, even among advocates, they don't even know how far to push this. How far do we go? Because there could be some disturbing aspects about the whole topic as well. That maybe people in positions to release the information will feel that it's not in the public's best interest to know. Perhaps I don't know. No, despite me thinking and assessing that there's going to be formal confirmation that there are craft of unknown or non-human origin. Beyond that, how far they go, I'm not entirely sure at the moment. I think that's still in play. And I think in terms of Dr. James Lakowski, and he picked up on this, he actually did mention that there was a craft of unknown origin. He made it very clear that it didn't seem prosaic in nature. But the term unknown origin is very, very important. And I would, I'd say that one of my articles did state that sources have told me that the arrow is in possession of materials of unknown origin. My sources have told me that. And I've asked the DoD well, I gave them an opportunity. I gave the DoD an opportunity to basically say that's not true, and to refute that claim, those allegations, and they've not been able to. So that tells you something. It tells you something, right?
Read between the lines. Yeah. Okay, Chris, I've taken up loads of your time. I really appreciate your time. Really appreciate you talking to me. I'll let you get back to it. I know you've had a long day. But yeah, thanks so much for your time and take care of yourself.
Jimmy, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to your audience as well. Thank you.